Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media.
Today on Spotlight, WashU develops a specialized test for blood cancers. Find out why it's the first of its kind. Plus, meet a man who wants to liberate people through food, how he used visualization to build his dream. And then it's Hispanic Heritage Month. You'll hear the story of the St. Louis Junta, followed by the Latinx artists. But first, it's been called a must-read for history buffs. It's Sunday, and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
Known as the Gateway to the West, St. Louis, Missouri served as the launching pad for the Lewis and Clark expedition and westward expansion of the United States during the 19th century. Tourists now come for the Arch, the Cardinals and the Blues, and the city's many cultural and historical attractions. But you have to cross the Mississippi River into Illinois to visit Cahokia Mounds to get a taste of St. Louis's original claim to fame.
I can't tell you how much I've heard about the World's Fair over the course of my life, or different aspects of St. Louis history, but never about its indigenous past. St. Louis was an international tourist destination in the early 1800s. European aristocrats and royalty and people from the East Coast came to St. Louis to see native peoples who were alive, wandering around, as well as these old mounds. So St. Louis had a really indigenous reputation, and I just became fascinated by how something could be so completely erased.
In Mound City, the place of the indigenous past and present in St. Louis, Patricia Cleary discusses the dark history surrounding the destruction of these ancient monuments and the mythology created to justify it.
Some people said these have to be natural phenomenon. Those who thought they were constructed by people argued that many of these mounds were constructed by a different race than contemporary native peoples. Maybe the Welsh built them.
The Welsh.
The Welsh. Maybe
okay.
The people of the lost continent of Atlantis.
Oh, that sounds logical. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe a lost tribe of Israel. Anybody but the ancestors of contemporary indigenous peoples. All of this is about the logic of territorial possession. If you can dissociate the people who live in a spot from the history of it, from the title to it, then you can use their land or take their land.
Mound City, I'd seen that moniker all over town, even growing up here from the 70s all the way up through now. What is a mound, and why was St. Louis called Mound City?
A mound is a constructed earthwork built by native peoples across the eastern half of the continent over the course of millennia. And there were mounds of many different kinds. Conical mounds, some of them mortuary mounds, ridge-topped mounds that could also be mortuary, flat pyramid-like mounds that had temples and homes of the elite on them, defensive mounds, effigy mounds that looked like serpents and other animals. And there were tens of thousands of them in Missouri as late as the 1930s. And like you, I grew up in St. Louis, and the only mound I had ever heard of before I became a professional historian was Monk's Mound at Cahokia. I knew about Cahokia mounds, but I had no idea that there were mounds on this side of the river.
And you knew even more than I did. I didn't visit Cahokia Mounds for the first time until 15 years ago. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's one of these things, if it was in another country, on another continent, visitors would come from all over the place, and the people who lived in that town would know so much about that area with that kind of distinction around it. But your book focuses a lot on the mounds that were on this side of the river, on the Missouri side of the river.
27 mounds arranged around a plaza, a mound known as Falling Gardens that had tiers, this big mound the size of a football field. I mean, they would have been incredible to look at. There are mounds in the county, and there are mounds still all over the state. Most of them are on private property. We don't necessarily know where all of them are. What I really was hoping to do with the book was to share as much as I could about the details of what happened to those mounds, how they were seen, explained, used, repurposed, and destroyed, and also to try to understand why we didn't learn about it.
To find out if there are any laws in place to protect the mounds that are still out there, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org. For more St. Louis stories, subscribe to the HEC YouTube channel. Connect STL from HEC Media.
Our lab historically has focused on developing tests for cancers of the blood. So that would be like acute myeloid leukemia, myelodysplastic syndromes, lymphoblastic leukemias.
And the test is a success.
It's a single test, gives you all the information you need. We can turn it around in as little as 3 days. It's really the first comprehensive single assay for risk stratification and diagnosis in myeloid neoplasms.
Dr. Eric Dunkevich is a professor of pathology and immunology, and he's the director of the Division of Genomic and Molecular Pathology at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. The testing for blood cancers is performed on the medical campus in the McDonald Genome Institute, where the scientists were the first in the world to demonstrate whole genome sequencing for identifying genetic errors responsible for the development and progression of cancer. Now, this whole genome sequencing test for blood cancers is designed to identify the full suite of genetic changes in a patient's cancer cells. The test is called ChromaSeq.
Well, Eric came up with the name, and it's a rather clever name. ChromaSeq means a fusion of two words, chromosome, so this is a whole chromosome test, and sequencing. So this is the sequencing of the entire DNA in the chromosome. So it's a clever combination there. It is a blood test, but what it actually tests out of the blood are cells that are in the blood, and what can be quite rare malignant cells in the blood.
Our thought was, several years ago was, we're doing all this different testing for acute myeloid leukemia, different testing modalities, which makes it very complicated, but can we use whole genome sequencing as a single assay to replace a lot of that? About 270 different patient samples, we showed analytic performance. We showed that the accuracy that we could generate with whole genome sequencing, the information that we got was the same as what we would get from conventional testing. And then in addition to that, about 20% of patients had new findings that we could validate that were not detected by conventional testing, which now we can generate more sensitive data with whole genome sequencing, and that helps stratify how aggressive the therapy is.
And now, ChromaSeq is the first whole genome sequencing test for cancer to be approved by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS.
This test actually changes the way that patients are treated, and that's what CMS recognized.
Washington University oncologists have been using the test successfully since 2021.
It is able to provide much, much more detailed information about what's going on in that cancer cell than other types of tests.
And so we're running it primarily now for initial diagnosis. Is it an AML or is it a myelodysplastic syndrome? And so there are certain gene mutations that can tell us this is an MDS or this is an AML, and those are treated differently, different outcomes.
And with Medicare approval for the test, physicians nationwide caring for Medicare patients with blood cancers will be able to order the test through Washington University Pathology Services, and Medicare will cover the cost. Meanwhile, more trials are underway.
We have a clinical trial now that's currently enrolling here at Washington University Barnes-Jewish Hospital for ChromaSeq. And so within that trial, we're seeking to understand how the ChromaSeq assay and the information we get from that changes patient management and changes the physician's approach to those patients compared to conventional testing.
Because it's a whole genome test, we believe that this test will be useful with some modifications for virtually any kind of cancer eventually.
They are also experiencing success with another test called MyeloSeq.
It is also for blood-based cancers, and in this case it's for myeloid leukemias, which is why it's called MyeloSeq.
MyeloSeq is targeted. It looks at about 50 genes.
MyeloSeq is currently used for patients at Siteman Cancer Center after treatment following the ChromaSeq diagnosis.
We're using that assay now for most of our AML and MDS patients post-therapy to monitor what's happening. So MyeloSeq is very, very sensitive. Because we're only looking at 50 genes, we can look very deep. You imagine like a patient, we do ChromaSeq on them, we identify specific gene mutations in those patients, and then the patients are treated. And then the next thing that we want to know is, well, did the treatment help? Did it clear the malignancy? Did it clear the clones? And so what MiloSeq can do is identify those gene mutations with a very, very high sensitivity, so several orders of magnitude more sensitive than ChromaSeq.
St. Louis is a world leader in cancer research.
The first cancer genome ever sequenced anywhere in the world was done here.
Local startups are playing a major role.
If you just say, what are we working on in St. Louis? It's pretty much everything.
Developing diagnostics and treatments. Making strides right here in St. Louis.
We can use that information to train the immune system on what they need to seek out and destroy wherever it is in the body.
For the latest cancer research studies and clinical trials taking place in St. Louis, search the Cancer Research page at hecmedia.org.
My spiritual name is Heru Dejedi Adeleke. That means the crown triumphs to the strength of a king. So my business is Heru, which by itself means liberator, king. So I want to liberate the people through food. I was vegan at one point, and I was just looking for some fresh food, and I noticed I didn't have that in my community. So you notice in St. Louis, 850,000 people in the metro area don't have a sustainable, healthy produce within a half mile of their community. And even if you are lucky to have one in your neighborhood, which I got a Snooks that's close to me, but it's different. Like as you go further out towards the suburbs, you can compare the one that's on the west side, and that's Richard Union. Then you go to one on Lindell, that's totally different. And then you go a step further and go to Clayton. Man, that's awesome. Like in Clayton, then you can go to West County. Like, that's like the best. And you want to we want to eat dragon fruit too, and experiment different stuff. Not that you're assuming that we just don't want it or something like that. Just let us try it out. So I just started off just growing food in buckets. And when I first tasted of lettuce that I grew and a tomato, I was like, wow, it tastes like this. Like I didn't even know it tastes that good. So I'm big on manifestation. So I was growing stuff in my buckets in the backyard. I sit on the porch. I had a vacant lot over there, typical city lot. I'm looking at it and I was like, man, I wonder how it look with some food over there. So I started visualizing it for real, down to the minute detail, like how the wind gonna feel through the hair of my arms, how it's gonna smell, what I'm gonna do with it. So I called Brandon Bosley. He's an alderman here. He was like, man, you can get a $5 lease, $5 for 5 years, and you can lease this land as long as you grow food. I said, all right, cool. So I just did that. Didn't really know what I was gonna do with it. I just had 3 raised beds started off, and I'm just growing stuff. Man, I'm growing zucchini. Some people over there didn't even know what zucchini was. So people walking through the alley. They're like, man, what you doing? So I'm like, man, so a light bulb went in my head. Maybe if I just grow some food, people come together, they get to talking to me, and then, I get somebody some fresh produce. So I got some flyers together, start passing them out in the neighborhood. And then I got a call. I already had a relationship with Brian and Jason. They was here. They called me and they was like, hey, we starting something up here at Confluence Farms. We'd love you to be a part of it. We like what you're doing. You want to come here and expand? I'm like, man, yeah, cool. So couldn't turn that down. This is my 2nd year now. So I do CSAs. Every 5 I sell, I donate to a family in need. I do farmers markets. I did a grant with St. Louis Philanthropy so I can provide free food for the retirement home. Sometimes older people get forgotten about, people do stuff for, the youth, stuff like that, but sometimes the elderly get forgotten. So I want to make sure that I don't forget them. I like to call myself a soul farmer. I think you are your energy in your hand. So that's even when I'm farming. I want to make sure I'm in good spirit. Because y'all got to eat my food, right? And I'm touching it. I'm putting the seed in the ground. So I think my energy should be pure or good. So I really believe in that, what you put into the seed, into the ground. I just know the stuff I do, and I've been changing, it worked. I can't tell you to a science, but I know I changed my diet and started eating this healthy stuff. Everything changed for me. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, but I know I changed my habits and started eating differently. My health got better. So if they can do it for me, I believe they can do it for everybody.
Later on Spotlight, another blip-blap song you're sure to enjoy. History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, president of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. In 1905, a group of Mexican revolutionaries arrived in St. Louis, intent on ousting Mexican President Porfirio Diaz from power. Known as the St. Louis Junta by the local press, this group of radicals published a newspaper, established a political party, raised an army, and helped spark the 1910 Mexican Revolution. Teen programs and adult tours manager Ryan Deloche shares their story.
In the early 1900s, the St. Louis press became obsessed with a group of local Mexican revolutionaries led by the anarchist writer and journalist Ricardo Flores Magón. Nicknamed the Scorpion because of the sting of his pen, Flores Magón was one of the most outspoken critics of Mexican President Porfirio Diaz. Diaz ruled Mexico with an iron fist for decades and squashed dissent with a network of spies and armed henchmen known as murales. And after years of imprisonment and suppression in Mexico by the Diaz regime, Flores Magón, his younger brother Enrique, and this small group of Mexican dissidents fled to the US, first settling in Texas before moving further north to St. Louis. In St. Louis, Flores Magón and the St. Louis Junta worked quickly to build a social movement against the Diaz regime. They restarted their newspaper, Regeneración, which had been outlawed in Mexico, reaching nearly 20,000 subscribers across the US and Mexico, and created a political party to challenge Diaz, the Partido Liberal Mexicano, commonly known as the PLM. Within 2 weeks of its founding, the PLM's office in St. Louis was raided, and Flores Magón and the other leaders of the PLM were arrested. After being released on bail, they jumped bond, fled St. Louis, and began to live life on the run. During the raid, the sheriff and local Mexican consul seized the newspaper's printing press and confiscated the files from the PLM office. Reading through the files, it became clear that the PLM wasn't just a political party. It was a revolutionary force intent on overthrowing the Mexican government. With its leadership on the run, the PLM continued its efforts in St. Louis, publishing a 52-point platform in 1906, promising to redistribute economic and political power and ignite a revolution in Mexico. Over the next 2 years, the PLM conducted several armed raids into Mexico, but the revolution they hoped for didn't materialize until 1910. Francisco Madero, whose donation had helped restart Regeneración in the United States, led the charge in the north of Mexico. Longtime Regeneración subscriber Emiliano Zapata led the fighting in the south, carrying flags with Regeneración's motto, Tierra y Libertad, or Land and Liberty, into battle. Together, they helped oust Diaz from power, and in 1917, Mexico adopted a new constitution, which was inspired by many of the ideas laid out in the PLM platform. Flores Magón never returned to Mexico. In 1907, he was captured by a St. Louis detective, Thomas Furlong, in Los Angeles, and he spent the rest of his life in and out of U.S. prisons, eventually dying in Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas in 1922. While his story has largely been forgotten in St. Louis, Flores Magón and his fellow revolutionaries, known today as Magonistas, are widely celebrated across Mexico for their role in sparking the Mexican Revolution.
Next on History Spotlight, the first crematory west of the Mississippi was right here in St. Louis.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Mid-America Emmys, Tellys, NATOAs, Auroras, and other awards. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Hundreds of nominations and wins, from regional to international levels. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries. Individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Plus so much more. And although doing good work is its own reward, recognition, well, it's nice too. See what all the fuss is about. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
So my background as an artist is I am a photographer, and I also I make things with my hands. I make sculptures, jewelry, I paint.
I graduated from architecture school in Colombia, but I was always interested in color and art techniques. So I have been since 2012 an artist.
You know, when I started my career, when I started business, in my family, art was not considered a career. It was a hobby. So when I moved to San Luis, I decided to do my art career.
I've always been interested through my work to highlight the need for representation and the need to understand migration as a human need, especially in today's state. All four of the artists that are working on this project, we all belong to this group of artists in St. Louis called Latinx Arts Network.
The Latinx Arts Network is a group of Hispanic or Latinx artists and artist allies. The purpose of the group is to support each other and also help create opportunities for our artists and our arts community.
Yes, we formed our committee in one of the Latinx meetings. We were talking about things that we wanted to do, and somebody brought up that they would like a mural, and I think it sparked all of our interests.
What inspired the mural? There was some narrative on the news about children separated from parents at the border. We felt that we want to do something to change this stereotype of the immigrants and people at the border.
Through the mural, I intended to make a female child, be important and take center stage.
Our girl is an Afro-Latin looking at the sky and looking for hope. That's why we have a blue, bright sky.
We introduced items, for example, African baskets, which were very much aware of the African culture being a predecessor of all of our cultures in Latin America.
When we got the location Delmar, we were aware of the African American community, so we included the baskets because we want to just honor the area.
We also have a flower that is native to Missouri, I believe.
I always feel that flower signifies the cycle of life and the beauty, and to know that the beauty is not forever and you go to the earth again and then you're reborn again.
We include some papel picado, which is very typical from Mexico. It's very festive, it looks like fiesta. We include the trolley is there. It's because it's kind of fun. People can take a picture, trying to get into the trolley, and San Luis Arc. Those two elements, kind of to make, like this, the stamp, the mural is in San Luis.
One of the characteristics of both the iguana and the monarch butterfly, both species that are able to adapt to different situations, different weathers, different environments. So we thought, how about that? Because we have those species in our countries and they reflect on that ability to blend in, ability to live in different environments.
We had so much feedback. Everybody that walked by was always saying, oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for doing it.
One guy in particular said that he loved the fact that the girl in the mural was of darker skin. He loved that. And he said, because he doesn't see that ever.
We hope that the community will continue to feel embraced by the message of the mural and that they will stop by and take photographs, take their children, their students, and basically have a conversation. What does this inspire to you? How do you see it? What is the thing that strikes you?
No matter how different we are or how diverse we are, it's always something that brings us together. I think it's some level of loving life, happiness. It's always colorful.
Like I say, por amor al arte, for the love of art.
Go to hecmedia.org for the arts and authors,
Completely accidental because I never set out to write a book.
science and history, culture and community,
Considered to be the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi.
education, films.
Finding the coin places the site firmly in the 13th century.
What's happening now around St. Louis and more. See for yourself at hecmedia.org.
Next week, meet the comic book author from Missouri that created Deadpool, Venom, and the X-Men. Plus, how St. Louis played a significant role in the evolution of cremation. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.